welcome to episode 120 of Pop Culturally Deprived, where each week we watch a movie I've never seen before, which is most of them, and talk about the good, the bad, and the painfully 80s fantasy. This week we're going to be talking about Willow on your The Bones Tell Me Nothing podcast. I'm Mandy Kay, and you can find me on Twitter at Mandy Kay if you want to just marvel at everything I still haven't seen.
And I'm Matthew Vose. You can find me on Instagram /MatthewVose81 if you want to see all the exciting baking I'm about to have to do.
Wait, you have to do baking?
When is this coming out? Yes, it's coming up to my dad's birthday. So I've been asked to do a cake for him. But I think this episode comes out after that, so I'm going to run with it.
Okay, perfect. Baking. You are going to hear us mention this for the next several shows, but we are taking a survey of all of our listeners, and we would love it if you could participate. It's going to help us learn more about you, no matter how long you've been a listener or how frequently you listen to the show. It is quick, easy, and anonymous, so if you would like to help us out, please go to eloquentgushing.com/survey.
And a quick tip from feedback we've had, try doing it on a browser, on a desktop or a laptop rather than your phone. A couple people have said it reset their answers when they came off to go and look at something else. So, yeah, do it on a browser. Yeah, sorry to the two people who reported that, whose names have now slipped my mind, having just read it a minute ago.
I knew it was at least 3 different people who clicked on the link in Twitter, and it just completely messed them up. So yeah. Browser. All right. And as you can hear from the wonderful laughter in the background, we are delighted to welcome Rachel Newberry back to the show.
Yay!
Longtime listeners may remember her from way back on episode 58 when she came on to talk about The Incredibles with us. Rachel is a longtime friend of the show and podcaster herself. You can hear more from her on Wonking Out and The Detective, the Doctor, and the Woman. So welcome back, Rachel. I'm so glad you're here.
I am thrilled to be here as well. Was it really episode 58? I was trying to remember. Well, I had no idea what number it was, but I was like, it
was a long time ago. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago.
No, it doesn't. But I guess if I think about it, it really was. But I'm so happy to be back for another episode. I've been listening to the show since the beginning, and I had a blast talking about The Incredibles with you. And I'm really excited for the opportunity to talk about a classic favorite of mine. If you're aware of me on Twitter at all, you may know that I have a cat named Willow. He is male. He is named after the titular character. So yeah, this is one of my favorites.
I always assumed that it was Willow from Buffy. And I don't even know if you're a fan of Buffy. I just assumed that if I know you, you're a fan of you like Buffy. And so
I am a fan of Buffy. But no, this is boy Willow.
Oh, I did not know that. That's wonderful.
He does get misgendered by vets all the time because he is so pretty.
That's great. Rachel, tell us when you first watched Willow and why it's been such a lasting favorite of yours.
When is a really good question. This movie came out when I was 5, I think. So I'm fairly confident I did not see it at that time, but I was probably 8 or 10. It was a big favorite of my father's. He's the one that got me into science fiction and fantasy. I blame him for all of this. So,
okay.
So it was one of his favorites, and we watched it probably fairly regularly when I was a kid. It was one that was pretty, quote unquote, safe, I guess. Mm-hmm. Not too scary, except the end. Sometimes my mom wasn't too thrilled, about people getting turned into pigs. She thought that was just gross, and I'm not sure those kids should be watching it. But as long as we watched it with my dad, and we were okay. I don't know that we actually ever owned a copy. It was a weird thing. Like, my dad would watch a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, but we didn't own much of it except for Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But I blame that on kind of my fundamentalist Christian upbringing. So it was this weird relationship with magic and fantasy. We watched it a lot. And I think I actually bought my dad the DVD 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
Which may have been the first time he actually owned a copy, but we would watch it all the time.
Yeah. Okay.
Nice. So, Mandy, this is an age-appropriate kids' classic for us. How come you've not seen Willow?
Well, okay, so like Rachel, I was 5 when it came out, and I didn't know I liked fantasy until I was in college. so it just wasn't something I was ever interested in. My favorite movies when I was a kid, like in the 8 to 10 range, were like Dirty Dancing and romance movies. Yes, I liked them even then. And also The Little Mermaid and, princess movies. And I guess the Dirty Dancing kind of qualifies in that genre. So I just never watched it. I've always been aware of the movie, mostly in a that's really bad 80s fantasy kind of way. I don't know why.
Possibly fair. We'll dig into that in a little bit. So a bit of history for everyone. Willow is a 1988 fantasy film. It was directed by Ron Howard and stars Warwick Davis, Val Kilmer, Joanne Whalley, and Jean Marsh. The story was developed by George Lucas when he was developing well-known mythological situations for a young audience, and created a few of those stories into films with greater or lesser success. When he was working on Return of the Jedi, Lucas approached Davis about playing the lead character Willow, but it would be several years before casting took place. They went into full production when they felt the technology could cope with the demands of the story and successfully execute a fantasy film. Some of the effects developed for Willow would go on to be the basis of effects used in Terminator 2 and in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Willow was moderately successful. It made $57 million at the box office. It became highly profitable after strong international and home video performances. It may be worth noting that Lucasfilm retained the home video rights for this one in their deal with MGM, and they then sold them on for a further $15 million to RCA Columbia.
Interesting.
He's good at that deal stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, making money left and right.
Yeah.
Forever.
So he kept the license rights to, products sold off Star Wars, and Star Wars was the first thing that sold lots of extra products. Interesting. Guy knows what he's doing. Mandy, do you want to tell us a bit what it's about?
I can sure try. So this movie is an odd cross between Snow White, the 10 Commandments, and Lord of the Rings. Except the ring is a baby and you want to keep it alive instead of destroy it.
Yeah, I never really thought about it as a cross between Lord of the Rings and specifically, I guess, the 10 Commandments, which I don't know why I missed that. Because especially when I was watching it this time, I was like, well, obviously.
I mean, it's a baby in a basket made out of weeds.
It's a baby in basket. There you go.
Yeah. And so then, after I put that together, I was like, Matthew's not going to let that stand. So I went and looked at the IMDb synopsis, and even they just say a reluctant dwarf must play a critical role in protecting a special baby from an evil queen. And I'm sorry, that can describe so many other movies.
It's Moses.
It's Moses.
With dwarves.
Yeah, it is. And it's Snow White because there's a dwarf and an evil queen, and it's just so much. Yeah. We can talk about some of that later, though, but it's very odd. It's an odd amalgamation of other movies that we know.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Rachel, do you own this one now? Did you still have to go and get it from Blockbuster or something?
Yes, from Blockbuster. No. I do actually. My boyfriend got me a Blu-ray for my birthday. So nice. I watched it that way. So it was the Blu-ray digital, so I think I watched the digital. But
cool.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know why I don't have this movie.
Nice.
I have to ask, whenever they converted it to Blu-ray, did they update any of the special effects to be done digitally, or is it just the same, just in higher quality visual?
Yes, it's the same. And I now have a 52-inch television, and I don't think I've watched it on this TV. I was like, oh,
that's wonderful.
It's so, sometimes I was like, oh, this is great. And then, oh my, some of the special effects, I was like, oh, yep, the 80s.
I think I read it is a new transfer, so they've cleaned it up at least, but yeah, I don't think they've done any extra work on it. Right.
I'd say, it looked pretty good. But,
nice.
In some of the areas, like the brownies,
yeah.
the outline, it's just they're just floating around. That's what this movie needed.
Mandy, how were you able to watch it?
Well, I do not have the Blu-ray, but it is available to rent on Amazon.
Nice. And it's exactly the same over here. Rentable from Amazon, although it was on TV not too long ago. I was watching something else I had recorded on the DVR, and it had adverts for Willow during it. Oh. And it's exactly the sort of film that I imagine just being on TV constantly.
Yeah.
I feel like
that makes sense.
I've seen it when I used to have live TV and I would scroll through like the guide looking for stuff. I feel like I would see Willow being there, like on some channel like Sci-Fi or FX or something. I just never watched it.
I was going to say, I feel like they could do some kind of, other movies that directors you know and love have made run that they would include Willow in, things like E.T. and Willow, and not that E.T. is a lesser known movie, but that type of thing. It kind of, did you know that? Because I don't know that I know I did not make the connection that George Lucas was involved in this movie until I was probably in high school.
Yeah, I had no idea when I sat down to watch it, and it showed up as a Lucasfilm production. I was like, what? And then it was like Ron Howard's name and then story by George Lucas. I was like, how have I never known any of these things? If I had known those things, I probably would have watched it much sooner.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing. I think Ron Howard, I didn't really kind of like get who that was for a number of years either. So this was like kind of just a movie that I liked, that I watched all the time, and I didn't really understand its larger significance until...
Right.
Well, okay, so let's dig into those people. Ron Howard, and then obviously Val Kilmer and Warwick Davis. Mandy, have you seen them in anything? Have you seen other work they've done?
Well, I mean, Ron Howard is always going to be Opie. But I guess he's also a good director. And maybe you don't know who Opie is?
I know it from references. I'm sure it's referenced in a Bloodhound Gang song. But that's not a show that made it over here.
Oh, okay. Well, and it may be just more popular in my frame of reference because it was set in North Carolina.
Ah, okay.
Like the town Mayberry is based on Mount Airy in North Carolina. Aunt Bee was from here. So maybe I'm just more familiar with the Andy Griffith Show than normal people would be. But I
wouldn't say necessarily. I mean, maybe a little bit. Like, I don't think that I realized that it was a North Carolina thing. But, and, I grew up, we didn't watch much television at all. And I am very familiar with the Andy Griffith Show because it's, it was safe and wholesome. Fun. Yes.
That was, you're allowed to watch.
I knew what that was.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, he's a good director and he's done a lot of really great movies. Some that we haven't seen on the show yet that I think we're going to, like Splash. One day we'll get to that.
Well, that was a question. Is Splash one you have or haven't seen?
I have not. It's on the list.
Okay.
But we've talked about him on the show before because we did Parenthood and he directed that. And he did Apollo 13 and the Da Vinci Code, and wow, he directed Solo. I did not know that.
Well, he was he kind of did.
He was like the 15th person to direct that film. So.
Oh, okay.
He was the final.
On his Wikipedia page, it says he did.
He did.
Let's see who next. Warwick Davis. I have always known Warwick Davis by sight and name, but I don't know why. I really don't. But now he's Professor Flitwick, so
probably Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, is he though? when
I feel like that's what I knew him from. Because he was that. Well, wasn't he? Didn't he also do the like that extra movie that they did, the other Endor movie? Wasn't he in that as well?
The Ewoks Battle for Endor.
Yeah. Yes. He's an Ewok, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't know that because you're in costume. I mean, so Matthew tweeted at me a video of all of the Warwick Davis characters in the Star Wars world, and he was in full on costume with masks in all of them.
Maybe I was just told. I mean, I feel like, because I did watch Star Wars and the Battle for Endor.
But by this point, he is now Mr. Star Wars. He does so much of the presentations. He does the interviews at things like Star Wars Celebration. I got to see him interviewing Carrie Fisher for like an hour. It was wonderful.
Okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
They then recreated the bit where she meets Wicket It was good.
Oh.
Although her dog got really confused by her hiding with him and started barking at him. So that was good.
Okay. Interesting.
That's great. Yeah, I just feel like I've always just known who he was.
That's what I feel like. And like even just looking at the cover of Willow, I always knew that Willow starred Warwick Davis, even though I never watched it. And I just always knew what he looked like. I always equated him with the long hair that he has in Willow. So maybe that's where it came from for me. I don't know.
Maybe. And he just looks, every time I watch this, I think, I'm like, oh, he looks so young. I mean, he was young.
Yeah.
He was so young, but he looks like, super young, very, almost like a child, which I'm sure, partially owing to his size. But because, like you, Mandy, I've seen him as Professor Flitwick, and he played a goblin, I think, as well. And
yeah, I was going to say, wasn't
Harry
he several
Potter
things
movies?
in Harry Potter?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was 2 or 3 characters, I think, that I can think of.
Okay.
And then we put him next to Val Kilmer. And God, I think this is at least the 3rd movie that we've done that had Val Kilmer in it on the show. I know we did Top Gun and Heat. I couldn't think of any others. But I'm apparently getting quite a Val Kilmer education on this show as well.
Have you seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang?
No, but it is on the list.
Okay, it better be on the list. If
It is.
I think
It
it's
was one that
of
Lonnie
Lonnie's
suggested.
favorites too. Yeah, I love that movie.
So this sort of fits in a certain strata of 80s fantasy for me. There are other films of this ilk, like Krull, Legend, Masters of the Universe, Time Bandits, The Neverending Story. Mandy, your experience of them, can we compare them to any that you have seen?
I've seen The Neverending Story. I don't know that I would have thought to compare them, but they're similar. I've heard of Krull, but only because of How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
Okay.
Yeah, same.
Matthew, have you seen How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days?
I don't think so. I feel like I've seen bits of it, so
Oh, you should watch
maybe.
it. You should watch it on the show. I feel like Matthew would have a lot to say.
Yeah, we've already got our next run of Matthew movies, and this is not one of them, but I'll keep it in my pocket. I'll keep it in my pocket for the next time, and then you will understand why we know who Krull is from that movie.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Rachel, you also listed here Dark Crystal and Labyrinth.
Right. I would consider those to be 80s fantasy.
Yeah, we did do Dark Crystal on the show, so I've seen that one. But it's puppets. Well, actually, Labyrinth is puppets, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're both
I think that's why I didn't think of them.
Right.
But I have seen both of those.
There's a top layer of really good films that have sort of lasted and become proper hits, such as The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. And then there's this whole range of kind of fantasy that maybe was made 5-10 years too early. Didn't quite hit all the points of the way it should look and the way you should put these things together, that eventually they worked out. They go through sci-fi, and then you hit the 2000s where you get Harry Potter, you get Lord of the Rings, which I suspect we're going to compare it to again at some point.
I would think so. Although I think one thing I really do like about Willow and Legend and Neverending Story, I think, is just that, sure, we can watch them and go, oh man, the CG or the effects, and that hasn't aged well. But I like to watch them as kind of look what they were doing. Look how ambitious they were. And, I would say that the things that they were trying and the things they were pushing helped, get us the movies that look a little better.
Absolutely.
So I'm a big fan of that, just kind of seeing the progression, because, if they decided to wait, really wait until it was really good, then maybe this movie might not have been made.
I am reminded of another bad 80s fantasy movie that I have seen.
Go on.
Beastmaster 2.
Okay.
Oh.
I haven't seen Beastmaster 1.
Yeah.
But I have seen Beastmaster 2. And a funny story, I used to have some friends before they moved out of state. They would host a bad movie night about once a month. And Beastmaster 2 was one of the movies.
Right. Okay.
So,
Nice.
yeah, we watched Beastmaster 2 through the portal of time.
Oh my.
Yeah, if you open it up, there is then this whole other thing of Conan and Red Sonja and Hercules and
Yeah.
other fantasy type films, but not necessarily pitched to kids. I think there's also a number of them that are watchable by kids, teens, younger viewers.
Yeah.
Okay, we will get back into that in a minute. However, Mandy, having now seen Willow, did you enjoy it?
Oh, I expected to absolutely love it. I mean, fantasy, George Lucas and Ron Howard, it had a perfect formula. But I wouldn't seek to watch it again. Like, I wouldn't say, oh, I really need to watch Willow. But if it was on or someone else was watching it, I would watch it again. It's like, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I have some very strong opinions about it, particularly the ending. But it's definitely not a favorite.
What am I going to ask? Is it that it just didn't grab you? Or is it that it grabbed you, it was interesting from the beginning, and then it sort of fell away or lost you somewhere?
I think it didn't grab me from the beginning.
Okay.
And as it went on, I became more invested in it, which is why I have some very definite opinions about how it ended. But it's funny because I was talking to Joseph about it afterwards, and this is one of his favorite movies too. And he was just completely baffled that I didn't just love it, and he made the comment, he said, you're looking at it through adult eyes and not the wonder of a child. And he thought that I was kind of missing something when I was talking about it, and it turned out that was the nostalgia factor. And I think that it's one of those things where when you watch it, no matter how many times you watch it or how old you get when you watch it, if you first watched it as a kid, you kind of always go back to that first time that you saw it, and so you still feel that wonder that you felt. And since my first time was in 2019, I don't get that. And so I'm missing out on some of the experience, I think.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Like, I could see where that could be an issue. Like I said, I watched it when I was a kid and multiple times throughout. And even I think this time watching it, and it's been a little while since I've seen it. And I think that the way that I view movies now, is with a much more critical eye, just from multiple perspectives, story being one of them. And that was one of the things I noticed this time. I was like, I'm noticing places where this is kind of a mess, but I still love it.
Yeah.
Because I do have that nostalgia. And I know it can be, hard.
Yeah, I think it had a lot of potential. I think the story itself was really, really good. The idea of this queen who's trying to kill this baby because she's afraid it's going to overthrow. I mean, this was straight out of a Disney movie, frankly.
Right. Right.
And it even had some moments. God, it was so campy. It had some moments that I referred to as this is straight out of a Disney animated movie. They just did it with real people. But it did have a lot of potential, and I feel like the dialogue could have been tightened up, and just a few other things, and I don't know if that's just the nature of it being from the 80s, and now I'm looking at it 30 years later, and that's the difference, or if even somebody watching it in the 80s would have said, hey, this could have been done better. I'm not sure, but coming to it now, it's definitely great idea, not great execution.
Yeah. And I think some of the writing was, I don't even call it like problematic or huge issue, but I think some of the writing could have been tightened up.
Is that from a place of we're making a kid's fantasy film or a younger audience fantasy film, so who cares? Is it just the fact that it's written in the 80s, so they weren't asking for so much out of their media?
That's definitely possible, because also, of course, now here in 2019, and we, all of us, and I think especially you and I, Matthew, have seen, the quantity of fantasy and sci-fi that we've consumed is, going to inform how we see things. And at the time that it was made, we didn't have that quantity. So you may not, maybe it just wasn't, a thing that they would like. So partially because it was the 80s, and partially because, they were just like, oh, we're making it for kids. So maybe they just didn't pay as close attention to some things.
Yeah, I don't know how much story actually impacts it, whether it's the broad strokes of he finds a baby, he takes a baby and wins, or if it's a beat by beat kind of thing.
It could be.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, I had a hard time figuring out who the audience was. Like, who was it supposed to be for? Is it supposed to be a kids movie? Is it supposed to be for older kids? Is it supposed to be for everybody? Just because, I mean, so if you think about the 3 movies that I compared it to, Snow White, The 10 Commandments, and The Lord of the Rings, Snow White is really the only kids movie on that. So I wasn't really sure who this was for. Were they catering to too wide of an audience, or am I just pushing it in a direction it shouldn't be going in?
Yeah, and I don't know. And again, if it's like an 80s thing, like, you know, if at the time it was kind of, oh, it's fantasy, then it's obviously for children. You know, it's kind of like, oh, women writing sci-fi is automatically young adult fiction now. It's this kind of this weird thing that we do. If they had a children's audience in mind, or if they just said, we're going to do this fantasy thing, and they went, well, it's fantasy, it's obviously for children. Because I think there's definitely elements that I would say, well, that's not for kids.
Right.
You know, even like the overall tone of the movie is bleak, but kind of, you know, it's like, it's not just like, oh, we have to save a baby and get the baby home. We have to save a baby from an evil queen
who wants to murder it.
Who wants to murder it, and who does, you know, dark, magic. You know, I noticed at the end that she was wearing, it looked like she was like wrapped up in weird like mummy rags. That I thought was really super odd. And she's wearing, you know, it's a very like, it's not just, oh, dark magic. I mean, there's like skulls everywhere, and there's blood and animals and things. So
yeah, but you know, all of that was in Snow White.
Yeah, it was. And actually, she kind of does look like the witch or the queen from Snow White.
Although I feel like, Matthew, when we talked about Snow White, did we talk about the audience? Was it intended to be for kids, or was it actually, because it was the first full-length animated feature, was it directed more towards adults in the audience? I can't remember.
I don't think we got into it. I suspect it is aimed at both.
Okay.
And that's kind of the genesis of Disney's being able to hit different audiences.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, like you, I kept flip-flopping on who this was for, because a lot of it feels like it's kind of pitching at the sort of 10 to 13 tween young teen market.
Yeah.
And then every so often it's like, oh, that's really quite violent, or, oh, he's grabbed Val Kilmer's breast. Okay, that's a bit extreme.
Right, yeah. Yeah, there's some...
Suddenly it goes a lot more adult. You're like, I'd have a conversation with my kids if they were watching this. Not that I have kids or anyone to talk to, but, you know.
But if you did.
But if I did, I would talk to them about this film, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, even looking at, you know, it's rated PG, but yeah, there's quite a bit of violence. And I think you can have fairly adult movies that are rated PG, because our rating system, you know, in this country is based on violence and sexual themes. Is really, that's our rating. It's, you know, there's quite a bit of violence, but how much blood you show,
exactly,
you know, makes the difference. So
if you don't actually show anyone getting stabbed, you're okay.
Right. And there's dead bodies everywhere, but
yeah,
but there's no blood.
Exactly. So it's PG.
Right.
I wouldn't put my 5-year-old in front of this movie and walk away. Not to. I mean, I don't have a 5-year-old, but if I would not set, you know, my 5-year-old niece in front of this movie and be like, okay, see ya in an hour. Traumatizing.
I think it was interesting what we were saying about the effects, because I think it is the difference between what we see here, where they are stretching and they're trying to do some interesting stuff with overlaying people, with transforming between characters and doing a bit of stop motion. And it doesn't quite come off. So they're pushing, but not quite getting there. And I wonder if it's that's keeping it in that kind of second strata of film, where The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, they pull them off. By and large, all the effects work really well. So that's allowed it to continue, whereas this has been surpassed since. Is that the thing that is the difference?
When did The Dark Crystal come out?
1980.
Yes.
I'm going to say
that's a good year.
Yeah.
That was a good year for movies.
82.
Okay.
Really? But those are mostly practical effects, though.
Maybe that is the difference, because I'm sitting here having all these thoughts about the special effects, and even like Joseph and I argued about them. I was like, they're so bad, and he was like, but it was the 80s, and I said, Die Hard came out in the 80s and its special effects were wonderful. They still hold up, and then we went and he was like, yeah, but that was so much later. And we looked it up and it was the same year. They both came out in 1988.
Really?
And now thinking about The Dark Crystal coming out 6 years earlier and pulling off their special effects so much more, maybe it is the difference between the usage of practical effects and actually trying to do special, like, digital effects like they did with the Brownies. Because the Brownies wasn't a practical effect, I don't remember enough about the Die Hard special effects to know how much may have been practical versus actually trying to do this other grand stuff. But maybe this movie was trying to do this really big stuff and it just wasn't ready.
Yeah, and I think, because the Brownies to me is like the big one, I guess, that doesn't, I don't say doesn't age well, but like you notice, the edges. You notice there's, like they filmed it and then they cut it out with like, like a big frame, so you can see the black edges up against stuff. And sometimes like they're trying to touch something and they're obviously not interacting with it. And you're just like, oh, ouch.
Right.
But, they didn't it's been a little while since I watched Die Hard, but I don't recall them, shrinking anybody down, so they didn't do, I don't know. Did Hans Gruber, is there a shrink ray involved that I don't remember? But
no, it was mostly just lots of explosions.
Right. So I think it's also like the type of effects that they choose to use can
That's
make
fair.
a difference in movies that are made in the same year. They're like, well, we're going to do explosions because we, that's a thing that we can do, and we can do it this way and it'll look good, because those are generally, from a distance, or you mix in a little practical effects for the up close and you're pretty much okay. But when you're shrinking people, because I noticed a couple of times when they were, and it's like, technically this is a practical effect, when Mad Mardigan and Willow are riding separate horses. You can, it's obvious that it is not a little person on that horse. Like it's just like a shorter person. Just from a distance, but even like I'm like, he's up to Mad Mardigan's shoulder. That is obviously not Warwick Davis. But
Okay, maybe I'm being too harsh on the special effects then.
Well, I think the last thing is that the comparison for me is that it was nominated for the Effects Academy Award, but it lost to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Which, that is deserving of that award.
Fair enough.
But it was nominated. Okay.
Yeah. I think I can see exactly what they're trying to do, but it's just not quite there in execution. Right. And then particularly that morphing effect at the end is really good. And you can see, yes, that is going to end up being the Terminator in Terminator 2. It just takes them some time to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you got to give it credit for that.
I can give it credit for that.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit on the story and the characters. Mandy, is there anyone you particularly cared for? Were you rooting for them, for this child? Did you follow it as it went along?
I was always rooting for Willow on a couple of levels. I wanted him to succeed at saving the baby. And then I also wanted him to kind of grow into himself. He lacked confidence the whole movie. That was part of his character arc. From the very beginning, he thought his choice for, which finger holds all of the power in the universe was stupid, and it was actually the right answer, but he didn't do it because he thought it was stupid. Mm-hmm. And so you've got this whole arc throughout the whole thing, even when he's trying to change What's-Her-Face back, she's constantly encouraging him, believe in yourself while you're doing it. You have to really see it, and you have to know that you can do it. And so I was really invested in him becoming the character that they were leading us to him becoming. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They just didn't. So we can talk about that when we talk about the end. Unless you want me to talk about it now.
I think so. Yeah, let's get into it.
So this is the thing that I have so many strong feelings about, because the ending of this movie pisses me off. I was so mad. Like, I was shouting at the TV, and then when I was talking to Joseph about it, I was shouting at him too, because Willow deserved better. Like, he absolutely deserved better. He was supposed to find the courage to use the wand and defeat the evil queen, not this bullshit powers that be defeating her just like they did in Snow White. You know, and then he gets his confidence from a magic book off screen and suddenly appears at home and he can do magic. That is completely letting us down from what they were trying to build up in the movie. Like, we were supposed to see him overcome his confidence. He was supposed to be able to use the wand, defeat the evil queen, and then actually be in himself. And we don't get any of that until after he gets back home. And it's because he read this book that we didn't even get to see him read in practice. It's just all of a sudden he gets home and he can like throw this thing in the sky and it turns into a bird. No, I'm sorry. That is not okay. And Willow deserved better.
Do you think it would have worked, like if the book had been there, like when he found, was it, mispronounce her name, is it Raziel? Like, I want to say Raziel, which is kind of how it's spelled, but that's not how they pronounce it. It's like Raziel. You know, if he found her and the book at the same time, so he had access to the book while he was trying to turn her back.
Yes, if we had seen him like practicing out of the book the entire journey after he met her, that would have made so much more sense. But he still would have needed to be the thing.
Right.
Like, he needed to be the hero. For this story to have a satisfying ending for me, he needed to be the one who overcame himself to take on the evil queen. Like, for a while, I thought Raziel was going to do it, but then she didn't do it. You know, she got knocked out. And I don't know, this whole idea that the powers that the evil queen were calling on would end up being the powers that defeated her. Like, I guess in some sort of way that has a sense of satisfaction tied to it, but it doesn't make sense for the story that we're being told, because this was Willow's story, and Willow was hiding. You know, he got to steal the baby, but he didn't get to defeat the evil queen, and I just feel like that's disappointing.
Like, it situationally worked out okay, but he didn't actively defeat her.
Is that how do you feel, Rachel? What's your take on certainly his culmination to the story?
No, I think I will agree that his there are parts of that are not satisfying. Like, I definitely see, you know, what you're saying, Mandy. Though at the same time, I think there's also what they were trying to do, and I don't know if it landed, I guess, is that even though, like, he wasn't himself at that point, you know, able to defeat her. Like, he didn't point the wand at her and, you know, cause her to disappear. But what he was able to do in that, you know, while all that was going on, is that he was able to protect the baby, and he was able to use his existing skill set, I suppose would be a good term, to hide her from the queen while this other stuff was happening, so that the baby was ultimately safe at the end. So it's a weird mix of, while we do want him to have those, you know, have that power and explore that power, and we're really excited he gets the book and that he's able to turn an apple into a dove at the end, because that's what he wanted. There's also, you know, part of that, it's like this weird, like, the power was within you the whole time, which it was, but also the person that you were at the beginning was good enough to save the baby. Because it wasn't anything he magically did, ultimately, that, you know, when he does, like, the magic trick, the big trick or whatever, like, that wasn't magic. Except, I'm sorry, how'd you get the baby from here to there, but whatever.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be, you know, it's supposed to be this sleight of hand thing. You know, so that's cool. So, and then that's a power or skill that he had at the beginning of the movie. So it's kind of this, I think, an amalgamation of both. Like, he was already worthy. But he also gets to have that magic because that's what he ultimately wants.
Yeah, I feel like even if he wasn't the one who actually destroyed the evil queen, I feel like he should have been the one to do the thing that triggers her downfall instead of all of a sudden these powers that were aligned with her suddenly are killing her. And we don't know why that happened. Is it just because suddenly the baby lives? Like,
I think it's the lightning. Sense. I believe it's like a spell gone awry kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like the last bit was supposed to, take the baby, but the baby was in the wrong spot, so it just took what was there instead, which was the queen. And it's a little, and it's one of those parts that I got to talk about. The writing could be a little bit tighter. There's some things I'm like, I think that's what happened, but I'm not sure. And if we're not, it's kind of one of those, well, we're not sure because it maybe a little bit sloppy on the writing angle.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need everything explained to me, but yeah, if we're not really sure what happened, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely, and I see what you're saying, and I do. I do agree with you. But I also kind of think, they were trying to do a thing that kind of sort of landed.
And I guess it's good that I was invested enough in the story and enjoyed it enough to be angry about it, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a difference.
See, I think that's what really surprised me about your reaction is, like, I expected you to really like that ending. It's incredibly similar to what he does with Luke Skywalker's ending, and spoilers for Star Wars here, but the point of, he tells us throughout the film, I'm a pretty good pilot myself, a target Wombats in my T-18. And then he's the one who's able to destroy the Death Star with those innate skills. In this, Willow, we're told he knows the right answer, that he's the most powerful and his finger is the most powerful. But it's in the end, he realizes that the skill he already has is the thing that can get Allura to protection or basically out of the reach of the Queen. And that then means that the spell can't be controlled anymore because the focus of it is gone. I think you're exactly right. There is no real explanation for why she loses control, but that's it happens.
Well, I mean, if you're going to be all logical about it.
But I like that it's not that he's given a wand, he's given a book, he's given magic powers specifically. He has a skill that he then brings to the situation, and hey, it's the skill that was needed. Congrats.
Yeah.
Although I think like the trick works earlier with the pig, and everyone's like, wow, that's a really good trick. And it's only because the pig runs off that everyone laughs at him. So this one only works because the baby can't crawl yet.
Right. That's true. And I'm sorry, and also the baby is like in some kind of weird like bondage contraption.
Yes.
The baby is about 10 by that point, so.
So can we talk about the other character that I had problems with?
Go on.
Particularly in the character development arena. Sorsha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, okay, so, well, first of all, there's this whole underlying, like, patriarchy bullshit going on in this movie, because when Willow's trying to give the baby to Eric, Eric's like, no, just find a woman to take care of her. I was like, that's bullshit. But then, Sorsha's been built up to be this great warrior princess who would never betray her mother. Like, her mother trusts Sorsha before she trusts her own advisors. She says that up front. And Sorsha decides to betray her because of a love spell with no words ever spoken. She's just suddenly on Val Kilmer's side because she's objectifying him and he has really pretty hair and great abs. I mean...
And he looks good in a dress.
He does look good in a dress. He looks good in everything in this movie. But she had no character development. She just went from, I'm going to kill the baby for my mother, to suddenly, because Val Kilmer has declared his love for her and declared that she is his moon, she just wistfully stares at him across the battlefield and then realizes that she can't kill him because she probably loves him too. But we only get that through her looking at him. Like, she never says anything, and she chooses to save Allura and be on their side with no words. Even at the end, she doesn't speak until she like yells, "Mother, no," or something like that. And it's just bullshit character development.
Yeah, it is weird. And that is something that I think I'm sure the first time I watched it probably didn't notice, but I think, maybe once I was a teenager, I it's kind of like it's a little strange. Her behavior is, it's not consistent, and like you said, character development, lack of character development, and now they have vocabulary for it. I'd say like her character, what we know about her character is mostly informed.
Yes.
Like like you said, she's supposed to be this great warrior princess. Well, we're told that she's this great warrior princess, and she does seem to be able to hold her own when she does fight. But like what her original motivations are and how they change, we don't know. Like,
yeah, they had a lot of room for telling us this really great transformative story about her. And I mean, I understand this is not her story. This is Willow's story, but Willow's story could have been made better if Saoirse's character was more fleshed out, I think. Like, the whole final showdown could have been done differently and could have been done better if they had given Saoirse an actual character arc instead of just... Yeah. Like, I don't know, they just abandoned her.
I think there's an argument to be made that what was needed, like specific, like inciting incident wise, I think what is missing for Saoirse is like for her to see something that causes her to go, wait a second, my mother is the baddie, and this child is worth saving, and what the child represents, or like what Willow protecting the child represents, is better than the alternative, and we don't have that. If like Willow and Saoirse had an interaction, or like Willow and Saoirse with the baby had some kind of interaction, and she'd seen like how, like, why does Willow care because this child is a human child and it's not his world, like why does he care about that, and then start to think about like how she might care about things that are not, she should care about things outside of what her mother cares about. Like we don't ever see that until she's just like, oh, this guy's pretty, and I guess since he likes this baby, I like this baby.
Exactly. That's all we get. She never changes her mind about the baby. Like, it feels like she can either save the baby or kill the baby. It doesn't matter, because the baby doesn't matter to her. What matters to her is whether or not she's pleasing her mother to start with, or all of a sudden she's pleasing Mad Mardigan because she's miraculously in love with him.
Right.
And this is what he wants. She has no agency. She has no self-opinions. Like, she has nothing of her own. She is just there to mirror what the people around her do.
Right. And I think, like when I was watching the scene, the fight scene where she's just standing there and watching Mad Mardigan this time around, I think it kind of occurred to me. I was like, I enjoy a good, slap, slap, kiss, kiss as much as the next person. Like, that's fine. This, enemies to lovers story, fine. Like that doesn't bother me, but we don't actually like see anything. Like, there's no like, like he doesn't save her life while escaping, or, like just none of those moments. Like, moments where he could kill her but doesn't, like that doesn't happen. It's just, and the scene in the tent when he's under the love spell and he's saying all these things about how much he loves her, like she's just standing there looking at him as if no one has ever noticed her as a woman before, as if no one has ever told her she's pretty, which I was like, as if, oh my God, he's the first person ever to notice her. Which I was like, well, I don't, and I'm just like, that's just me inferring, like, that's what it kind of felt like to me. But we don't know because she doesn't say that. Like, why would him saying those things to her make any difference?
Well, I mean, I can believe that just because of who her mother is. She's probably, her mother has probably never told her that she loves her. And I know that's a princess trope. I get it.
Right.
It could have been done so much better, I think, is where I'm coming from on this. Like, she's a good character and she had so much potential, and they just didn't use her the way they should have.
Right.
So I think the other character that we've not really touched on then is Val Kilmer, Mad Mardigan. And we talked Willow's journey. We've talked that we really want Saoirse to actually have something. And I think you're exactly right. It is fixed by a line of, Well, in either direction, how can you support your mother where what she wants to do is kill babies? Or how can you kill babies when they haven't done anything yet? That is the wrong thing to do. Your mother is obviously bad, so, it's such a simple fix.
Mm-hmm.
Does he actually have a story in this, Val Kilmer? Is he just there? Is he Indiana Jones?
Oh,
I think he does. Because I think he falls in love with Allura the same way Willow does. Honestly.
Okay.
And so I buy him wanting to protect both of them in the last half of the movie.
Yeah.
I was disappointed that he betrayed them, but I get it. I mean, he was set up to betray them from the beginning, I mean, I was honestly surprised that the brownies stole the baby from him and that he didn't give the baby to the brownies. I was expecting him from that point to betray them.
Right.
And so it didn't surprise me that he did eventually, even though he had already realized he loved Allura at that point. It takes a lot for a leopard to change his spots. And I think he needed more time to get there, and then he got it, because they were all captured together, and he had more time with them, and he had more time of building those relationships. And so when it came time to escape, it wasn't just about him anymore. And so I appreciated his arc. I thought they did his fairly well.
I think there's an element of, like they make the point when we first meet him to say that he doesn't have any loyalties, right? Like he's a sellsword. He's maybe probably a sword for hire, right? Like that's what he is. He has allegiance to whoever is paying him. He's Bronn from Game of Thrones. Give me money, I'll do whatever. They tell us that, like he doesn't have loyalty to anybody. And then, so basically what he is a man looking for something to believe in. And then he does, and I do totally believe that he falls in love with the baby, and that is his something to believe in. So I do think he does have an arc, and they do a fairly decent job of showing it to us. Like you said, the baby gets stolen by the brownies, and he perhaps is like, well, that really sucks, but okay, whatever. But then when he has an opportunity to fix that, to protect the baby, he does. And that's the point, I think, at which he's all in, I think. When he makes that choice to not run the opposite direction from Willow and the baby, or just be get off my apple cart with that baby. This is my escape. They're in it together, and he's protecting both of them at that point. So I think that's, to me, is when he kind of makes that decision to choose a side.
It's interesting because even though this movie is called Willow and we know it's supposed to be Willow's story, I'm not sure the screenplay writer knew that, because he gave Mad Mardigan a better arc than he gave Willow.
Interesting, because I don't think I think I can see that point of he's protecting them in the middle sequences. I'm just not sure he particularly does anything to really help. A lot of it is Willow with the baby going through stuff. And then sometimes there's a big fight scene with lots of stuff going on, but you don't know. Well, there is a not small chance that if Mad Mardigan wasn't there, it wouldn't turn out the same way anyway. And then at the end, it is Willow and the women go to defeat Beth Morda.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I keep waiting for his moment. Oh, he's done the thing that's going to save everyone. And I don't feel like it ever comes.
Well, but he's not supposed to, because it's not his story.
Yeah.
But there were moments, particularly with the big troll beast, I think. And that whole fight scene where Saoirse was just standing there staring at Val Kilmer.
Yeah.
That was his big moment, I think, his fighting there.
Okay.
I
think so.
And then he did do the fighting off screen that we didn't see at the castle when we were focusing on what was happening during the ritual with the evil queen. He was still outside fighting. We just didn't get to see that part, but because he was trying to keep the soldiers from getting to them.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I do agree with you, Mandy, that he doesn't have to have his big hero moment because it isn't his movie.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think he has an arc And we do see him, I think we see him change as a character into a better person.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't have to change into a better person and have a big hero moment because it isn't his movie. But he does have a little more development than Willow, which is it's a bit lopsided.
Yeah.
But he's the white, he's the white hetero dude, so he's got a solid arc.
Yeah, that is, I think, the reason he's there, and particularly because of the way Val Kilmer looks in this. We got a couple of good tweets on it. So at _Amanda313, had to watch this tonight. Must have been a good 20 years or so. I remember debating as a youngster if I was going to marry Bad Martigan or Jareth. I'm still torn, to be honest. Fave part, whenever Saoirse kicks Mads. And at Mad Max Mum, loved that movie as a kid. Haven't shown it to my kids yet, but might remedy that soon. I've always loved Val Kilmer's hair. I think that might be the reason he's here, is because he's quite pretty.
He is quite pretty.
He is.
Like, is there anybody who doesn't want that head of hair? I mean, come on.
I will say, if your decision is between Val Kilmer or David Bowie, I'm pretty sure it's Jareth.
Not for me.
Really?
Really?
It's a very different aesthetic, and I would kind of, I think I'm with you, Mandy, because, I mean, Jareth, I'm like, I'd say he's pretty, and I will say that, Val Kilmer looks pretty, but I think I'd go with Mad Mardigan as well. Like, aesthetically, it's more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm on my own, me and Ziggy, over here in the corner.
Well, good. I think, though, it is interesting just to talk about Val Kilmer a little bit more. The types of movies. You kind of like look at actors and the types of movies they've been in and the different choices that they've made. Because, and you may have talked about this when we talked about Top Gun, and it's been a little while since I listened to that episode, but, like Val Kilmer and Tom Cruise. Because they're, approximately, like, they're about, the same age. They've been making movies about the same length of time. Val Kilmer did this movie. Tom Cruise was in Legend. I don't know if, like, you could kind of make a comparison between the types of movies that they made after and kind of the ways that their careers have gone. Kind of an interesting comparison, I think. Yeah. Between the two, I think I would... I like some of what Tom Cruise has done. I like stuff that Tom Cruise did 20 years ago more than stuff that he's done recently. But that's just, choices. I don't, also I think he's a little woohoo bananas. But I think, if I had to pick, between Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer, I'd probably pick Val Kilmer.
Interesting.
But they are very pretty similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Tom Cruise has made better choices with the films he's done.
Has he, though?
When you look at about the same time that Batman Forever comes out and Mission Impossible comes out, and Val Kilmer goes on to do The Island of Dr. Moreau and Red Planet, and you've got someone else off doing Vanilla Sky and Interview with a Vampire, and films that just have a better lasting quality to them.
True. Though I also sometimes wonder if, I just assuming that Val Kilmer doesn't regret any of those decisions, even if they weren't, the bigger movies, if he, made better creative choices for himself or not. I think maybe that's something I sometimes think about, like, he was in that movie, but hey, if he enjoyed it and he thinks he did okay, then I guess he's doing okay over, like you said, Vanilla Sky and, some of those, and Mission Impossible. I think there's too many Mission Impossible movies, but that's just me personally.
So we had another comment from a friend of the show, Mandy's co-host on Desire Made Real, at Inferior Caitlin. Caitlin said, genuinely think this is the best fantasy movie made pre-Lord of the Rings. So many amazing women characters, and Bath Morder aside, they all live. Don't read the book sequels. I think this is the only fantasy movie I've seen that utilizes people with dwarfism as a separate race from humans and gives them so much of a culture and wide range of personalities. I honestly don't know if they've ever been given that in movies. They're always just a goofy dwarf who shows up with a big axe. Now, this is the bit where I then want to talk about Billy Barty, who played the sorcerer, whose name?
High Aldwin.
High Aldwin. Yes.
He didn't have a name. That's his title, I think.
The Nelwyn Wizard. So he played a dwarf character in a fantasy movie just before this. He is Gwildor from Master of the Universe, and you can absolutely see it. The two characters are not too different at all. But if we're talking a different race, and you're hiring people who might have dwarfism or other things to allow them to play it, he is also the rotoscope film for Bilbo in... And I think Sam in the animated Lord of the Rings.
Oh, I did not know that.
So I think hobbits are kind
I should have known.
They're very much the origin for the idea of the Nelwyn. But having Billy Barty, because he's just so enthusiastic and kind of giggly and happy, he's wonderful. I think Mandy, he particularly appealed to you, some of the stuff he did.
He did. I really liked a couple of his lines that he had where he was trying to be this masterful sorcerer and like keep all that bluster up in front of the townspeople, and he like throws the bones and then whispers to Willow, "The bones tell me nothing," but then to the entire town, he gets the information he needed from Willow, and he let the town know that the bones told him. I thought that was pretty spectacular. And then he had another moment just like it when he's trying to get them all to follow the bird, and then they're like, "The bird's going back to the village," and he's like, "Ignore the bird, follow the river." And so he's very enthusiastically into portraying this high wizard, but getting it wrong, and then still figuring out how to make it right. It tickled me. It tickled me a lot.
Yeah, I really liked the whole that whole, I'll say, society, or the whole race, that was one of the things I think about this movie that I was like, I wanted more of that. Like, I want more of Willow. I want more Willow and his family. I want, what's their life like? What's their world like? Because I definitely appreciated, that we see them as a whole culture and a wide range of personalities, which Caitlin's right, we don't see that very often. I think, maybe we see it in books, but we haven't seen it on the screen. And I would have, kind of liked to see more of that. And also, like when he goes to leave and his wife just like is like, "Oh, here is like a chunk of my hair." It's like, is this a cultural thing? Like, and it never comes up again. like, oh, is there like some weird like power inherent with carrying your spouse's hair around? No, it's just. You think a lock of hair? Well, how about a whole hank of hair? Just it's just like, that's weird. Like, I don't hate it, but I'm also like, okay.
That's funny. Apparently I missed the part where she gave him the hair. So later on in the movie, whenever he is like petting the braid that's tucked into his jacket, I'm like, where did that come from? I was so confused.
Yeah. But yeah, I would like to see more of the village, that world, that life, I think.
Yeah.
And are there things in this film, Rachel, that you could pull out and say that is my absolute favorite, or is it just the whole thing is still a delight to you?
I think favorite. I mean, as awful, as horrible as the whole like cross-dressing kind of sexual assault, weird, no homo thing with Mad Mardigan dressed as a woman. That whole bit is a little bit strange in parts. I really enjoy like the end of it where he's like, in the dress and going, he goes off the side of the balcony and into the wagon, and Willow is just running after him yelling, "Mad Mardigan, Mad Mardigan!" And I feel like it's something that we just used to yell when we were kids.
Okay.
Like it just like, or if we were, what movie do you want to watch? Oh, we want to watch Mad Mardigan. Well, it's Willow but it's just like repeatable. I don't know.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think that whole sequence, you know, like him going over the side and he's got the baby, he's in the dress and he's in the wagon, and then Willow's behind him and they're, you know, just riding off. And the brownies, I think that whole sequence, if I were to say like my favorite part, that would be it, because it also it works pretty well, I think, overall. Even, you know, that bit at the end when he's like, you know, never drive that fast with an infant. I saved that infant's life.
Yeah, the whole cart
works.
sequence is very good. It is properly exciting, and there is some really good, again, sort of practical effects of the cart and the way it's moving.
Right.
Yeah, they do a lot of good work there.
And even the bit with you know, so they have a chariot, okay, and this guy, random ninja throwing star, and then also a mace. I was like, and that's one of the bits where I'm like, I can't, like, if I get to like pay too close attention, I'm just like, I don't understand like what the rules are, because it's just like random fighting people. This doesn't make sense. Is he a ninja? No, I don't think he's a ninja, but he just has a random throwing star. There's a mace, some weird, you know, this funny looking chariot. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I really enjoy that bit.
And Mandy, how about you? What did you particularly enjoy? What stood out to you in this?
Well, I mean, we've already talked about Val Kilmer's hair, so that's the first thing. It's so good. So good. I think I really, really loved how hard Willow tried to keep his family away from the baby at the beginning. When he realizes that his children have found this baby, he walks up to them and he goes, "Don't go near it. We don't know where it's been." And it just cracked me up because, you know, that's what parents say to their kids when they find stuff on the floor that they want to put in their mouth. It cracked me up. I don't know. And then later, after he gets the baby home, he's just very stern. Absolutely, under no condition whatsoever is anyone in this family to fall in love with that baby. And then they all fall in love with that baby.
Very good, yeah. Because you know he's just being utterly ignored.
Yes, yes.
Right.
I liked the way he delivered that line. Like, he was trying so hard to put his foot down, and it didn't work. And then, of course, he fell in love with the baby, too. So it tickled me. I liked it.
Yeah, Warwick Davis is very charming, I think.
Yes.
He's very good. And it's interesting the difference between like him and Peter Dinklage. Peter Dinklage has always said he doesn't want to play dwarves and pixies and fantastical creatures.
Yeah.
He just wants to play straight characters.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like some of that is off the back of the work done by Warwick Davis to show actually you can still deliver a good performance, even if you're cast as a race of people of that stature or as goblins or dwarves or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about you, Matthew? You haven't been super vocal this episode. Were there other things besides Billy Barty that you liked about this movie?
We've not mentioned the brownies, and we didn't mention him last week, which perhaps we should have done. Kevin Pollak was one of the brownies. And like you say, Rachel, I have no idea which one. the smarter one, the Ted to the Bill.
He was Rule.
Okay, sure.
I only know this because I looked them up. I was like, I know that face. Who is he? And so then I looked up both brownies and saw which character they played. So that's why I know this.
Yeah. So Kevin Pollak seems to be cropping up in everything at the moment. I've recently finished season 1 of The Amazing Mrs. Maisel. And he is the man's father in that, and he's really good in that. He's not Tony Shalhoub.
He's great.
Let's be clear, Tony Shalhoub is the best thing in that. But we saw him last week in Wayne's World 2. And then he crops up in this. It's like, oh, hey, it's that dude again.
It is, yeah. Like I said, I recognized his face, but I still couldn't really tell you what he's been in.
Yeah.
Other than he was in A Few Good Men. I know that. But I see him in other things.
Yeah, me too. And I think there's a bit at the end, when they're all like celebrating and he takes off his hat with that weird mouse he's wearing on his head and he's like, bald. And I was like, I feel like this movie is proof that Kevin Pollak has never actually had hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Him and Stanley Tucci, I'm like, I think they have never had hair. Like, the only time I've ever seen them play a character with hair is when they're like playing like a flashback of their whatever character they're playing. And they're like, oh, well, we'll make them look younger by giving them hair. Mm-hmm. So it's not actually them. It's not like that actor with their own hair. Like, I just don't think they've ever had hair.
Yeah, Mitch Pileggi, who played A.D. Skinner in The X-Files, I've heard him talking and
Yeah.
saying, like, it was really good losing my hair early, because then it's just gone. And you can play pretty much any age at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
Matthew, did you know that Kevin Pollak was also in LA Story?
Was he? Is he one of the people at the lunch scene?
I think so. His
Okay.
character name was Frank Swan.
So that's just the thing. He is just cropping up everywhere at the moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So weird.
And there is a sequence that I feel is the clip that is always used to show Willow anytime I've seen it in adverts or, you know, on other movie shows, that kind of thing. The bit where Val Kilmer is told he's pretty good at something, flips the sword, falls over on the snow, and then they have to race off down the hill on the back of a shield. I feel like that is the clip that's always used for this film, and with good reason. Like, it is quite funny, it's got high action and so on. But the rest of the film is fairly sort of grimy. It's in castles and it's in forest and it's a bit dark. And then suddenly you have this sequence in the snow and it's bright and there's action going on. And then we're back in a forest castle place.
Yeah.
And it's almost like false advertising. That's the bit of it you always seem to see.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, they do the action quite well in this. So that is
Yeah.
a very fun sequence.
No. All right. Well, is there anything else that we need to discuss about Willow?
So I discovered on Wikipedia that apparently there are 1 or 2 video games. There's something on Nintendo, a Willow role-playing game on Nintendo from the 80s. But also most interesting to me was that in March of this year, Ron Howard confirmed that there is a TV show in development, which I believe would take place after the events of the movie. And it's supposed to be on the Disney Plus platform and will include Warwick Davis.
Cool.
Okay.
I'd be interested to see that.
Yeah.
Disney's working really hard to make sure that they've got all this new stuff that make people want to subscribe to
Yeah.
Disney Plus.
Yeah, they're getting all kinds of interesting possibilities on that.
And I think even this story would work with a bit more time given to it. You know, it is a very Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones sort of thing. Yeah, so a bit more space for it to get more information about some of these cultures we've seen, some of the stuff of magic in the world. And clearly it has a history to it, given how long Finn Raziel's been a possum.
Sorry, I'm reading an article about this.
Okay.
I got interested. Okay, I can read it later.
Yeah.
Sorry. All right. Well, if you would like to join the conversation, you can use the hashtag PCDeprived on Twitter. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Eloquent Gushing, or you can send an email to podcast@eloquentgushing.com.
Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun and a really good movie to bring on. So it's quite a fun one to watch. Where can people find your work?
You can find me on Twitter at FarFlungHope5. All kinds of ramblings there. I don't know if I would call it my work. But I also tweet for my podcasts, The Detective, The Doctor, and the Woman, and Wonking Out. The Twitter for that is at 3sreginas. We are currently doing BBC Sherlock Season 2 on Detective, Doctor, and the Woman. And then I believe we're going to take a short break over the summer, but we've got a number of episodes there, if that is of any interest to you at all.
Awesome. Go check it out. Pop Culture Deprived is completely funded by listeners like you through Patreon. Anything you can give, even $1 a month, it gives access to exclusive content and helps to support the network. To find out more, go to patreon.com/eloquentgushing and check out the other shows that we do at our homepage, eloquentgushing.com.
And we'll be back next week with another episode where we'll talk about adventures in babysitting with Justine from the Cutaways podcast. Until next time, I'm Andy Kay.
And don't call me a peck. Pop Culturally Deprived is an Eloquent Gushing production. For more information, go to eloquentgushing.com or find us on Twitter at eloquentgushing.